Hello and welcome to this DCS A10 video. In this video I'm going to demonstrate the use of the radios, and it's in two parts. The first part will look at just basic communication with the tower. We use the AM radio and communicating with the maintenance services on the ground, and in the air we're going to set up presets on the other two radios, and we're going to communicate with different groups in the air. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch on our power in order to get power to the radio. So we're going to liven up our APU as part of our startup procedure. And once the APU is spooled up, I'm going to switch on the APU generator. And this will provide power to all our systems, including our radios. Okay, there it goes. So let's have a look at our radios on the left hand panel. Let's get a view where we can see them all. Okay, that looks okay. And we can see there's three radios there. We have a VHF AM radio, a UHF radio, and a VHF FM radio. And they work on different frequencies. Approximately the AM radio, we're going to designate these as the AM, the UHF and the FM. The AM radio works on a frequency range of approximately 116 to 152 megahertz. The UHF radio approximately 225 to 400, and the FM radio approximately 30 to 76. So in order to switch on the AM radio, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the right hand dial on the radio to the transmit receive mode. As a cold start, it'll be in the off position always, and the left hand dial should be in the manual position, and this is correct to enable us to communicate on the frequency designated on the frequency dial. To switch on the UHF radio, it's the left hand dial is in the off position, and we switch it on to either the manual or both. Main or both. And main is the ensures communication on the frequency that's designated on the dial on the panel. Both enables both communication on that frequency and the monitoring of the guard channel. The FM radio works the same as the AM radio, so it's the dial switch on the right hand side, switch it to transmit receive, and make sure the left hand one is in the manual mode. Now that we've got all three radios switched on and powered up, we're going to dial in the frequency for Kobaletti, which is 133 on the AM radio, and we're going to use our mic switch to communicate with the tower. So using the left or right mouth switch, whichever is appropriate, you can change the frequency. We're going to change it to 133. Everything is switched on there. So now we're going to communicate with the tower, and the way we do this is we press the mic switch for the appropriate radio. Remember, there's a separate mic switch for each of the radios, and the way we know we've used the correct one is from the top line. So we're communicating now on the VHF AM because we've switched the correct mic switch. Going to communicate with the tower, so it's option 5, which is ATCs, and normally the tower that we're currently close to comes up at the top of the list. So we click on Kobaletti and request startup.
Kobaletti, in field 1-1, request startup. In field 1-1, Kobaletti, cleared for startup. So
you can see we get the text readout of the communications back, and we also get the audible feedback. So that tells us we've communicated directly with the tower. So it's given us clearance to start up. We're not going to continue with the startup here, but we're going to talk to the ground crew, and we're going to choose some of the ground crew services and show how to communicate with them. Well, the first thing to note is, in order to communicate with the ground crew, we've got to have a couple of vehicles on the map and at the runway, and I've just parked them here beside us so we can see what they are and what they look like. If these are not present on the map and you try and use the ground crew communications, you'll find you're not getting any feedback and you'll be wondering what's wrong. So these are prerequisites for communicating with maintenance. So now that we know they're present, we should be able to request them to help us out. And we're going to scroll back to the intercom switch, intercom panel, which is to the left hand side of our main radio panel. And the dial we're interested in to communicate with the ground crew is the mode, the intercom mode dial. You can see currently it's in the VHF position. If we look at the position of that VHF symbol on the dial. In order to switch it to maintenance, we rotate it 2 steps in a clockwise direction until the intercom is at the 12 o'clock position. And we know we're in the correct mode when we select the mic switch. Remember, we always have to select the mic switch in order to communicate with somebody. And when we click on the AM radio mic switch, we find now it's changed to interphone. I'm just going to move this so we can see it easily. So it's changed from the VHF AM to the interphone option. And now we can communicate with the ground crew. I'm going to select ground crew, rearm. It doesn't matter, I'm just going to select something randomly.
Request rearming. Copy.
And the copy feedback there, you see ground crew copy, that's an indication that the communication has been transmitted and received correctly. So now they're going about their business in rearming our plane, and we could go ahead and continue with our startup procedure while they're doing that. You could go through the process of requesting that and requesting fuel if you needed to, and then you could go through your startup procedure. However, normally you'll have the loadout set up correctly at the start of your mission. I'm going to rotate that back to its original position,
Rearming complete.
and we've got the feedback from the crew to say that's done. So now we can go ahead and move forward to the next part, which is in the air, and we're going to be looking at the setting up of the presets and testing out the different radios. Just a note that all that work would normally be done on the ground. So I'll see you in a moment. Okay, now that we know how to switch on the radios and to talk to the ground crew, I'm going to demonstrate the radios in action and how to set presets and communicate with the different presets. Let's put ourselves in a holding pattern. And now I'm going to just get a view that allows us to see the radios together. Okay, that looks okay. So now we're going to start off with the AM radio. Remember our designations for the radios. This is the AM radio, this is the UHF radio, and this is the FM radio. So in our briefing we have air groups that we need to talk to, and I've blocked them off into the different radios sets, and I've given them channel numbers. So you can see on the AM radio we've got 3 groups, 133, 134.5 and 135.5. So I'm going to set up all the radios for the channels first of all, and then we'll come back and test them out. So the way we do this on the AM radio is we select the frequency, 133 is the first one, and we make sure that this mode is in the manual mode, and we choose our preset and click the load button, and that's loaded in our preset, loaded in this frequency as our channel 1. The next frequency is 134.5, and in order to load it into channel 2 we roll the dial and click the load button, and the same with 135.5, load. So once those 3 are in there, remember currently we're still receiving on whatever the frequency is set on the dial here, but if we want to receive on the frequency determined by the presets, we click the selector into the preset position. The next radio, it's got several groups, but we've got them blocked into 2. So the first is our flight, which is at 251, and all the other groups are 255. and I've done this because we don't actually, I can't give commands to these, so I have to wait until there's random communications from them to demonstrate it. So 251 and 255 on the UHF radio, and let's go down here and look at how we do the presets here. This one is a little bit different. The radio master mode on the right hand side can be in manual or preset. If it's in manual mode, the communication is whatever frequency is on the dial. If it's on preset, it's whatever channel has been selected. Now, unlike the one up here where we've got to be in manual mode in order to load in the channels, with this one we've got to be in the preset mode in order to load in the channels. So the default one is 251, and we're going to load that in as channel 1, and the way we do that is we open this little box here and we click on the red load button here. This dial here enables us to dial forward to the next channel, and we're going to we're going to load in the next channel, which is 255. So we roll up the dial to 255. This is still in the preset position, so we can click on the load button. So now we have the those two channels set up, 251 and 255. We can close off this box, maintain our switch in the preset position, and I'm going to roll this off the frequencies of any of the contacts we've set up, so that we know that when we're receiving on this channel it'll be through one of these channel presets. The last radio, the FM radio, has got two groups to be programmed, and one is at 35 and the other is at 45, so it's very similar to the AM radio above. We change the frequency on the frequency dial, sorry, leave that as 35, and we make sure we've chosen our preset and it's 1. We load that in, make sure that this dial on the left hand side is in the manual mode, and we go to 45 for the next, change our preset to 2 and load. And when we want to now use these presets and not the indication on the dial, we click into the preset mode, and I'm just going to move that off that so we know that none of the groups are on those frequencies. So I'm going to now start communicating with them, and I'm going to communicate with the channel 1 on the AM radio, and we can see it's Cobaletti's tower. The next one is Colt, it's a forward air controller, and the final one is Overlord. So let's do it in that sequence. So go back to preset 1. We're in the preset communications mode, and we're going to choose the radio, and we choose the radio with the mic switch. Remember, we've got to choose the correct radio, otherwise we end up not talking to the particular group we need to be. So choose the radio switch to give us the correct radio, and we can see that by the top line tells us that we're on the AM radio. The first contact in channel 1 is Cobaletti, so I'm going to select the ATCs here and click Cobaletti and request some information.
Cobaletti, in field 1-1. Request navigation assistance. Enfield 1-1. Cobaletti, ADS.
Okay, we saw that that's working, so let's now move on to our forward air controller. Same radio using the mic switch, and we're going to click on JTAGs, Colt 1, and going to check in with Colt 1.
1-1. This is Enfield 1-1. 2 810 3 8 Tango Kilo Mike 8698 9000. Armed with AGM 65D, AGM 65H, CBU 97, CBU 87, 1150. Gun. Time on station is 0 plus 15. Available for tasking. What do you have for us?
This guy can take a little time to read back, but we'll give him a moment.
Enfield 1-1. This is Colt 1-1. Tight point in effect. Advise when ready for 9 line.
Okay, so we're going to check out that, and we're going to change the channel.
1-1. We are at the end of Vol and are checking out. Stay safe down there.
And we're now going to talk to our AWACS, which is channel 3, Overlord, and we're going to request picture.
Overlord, Enfield 1-1. request picture. Enfield 1-1, Overlord, clean.
Okay, so that looks good for those 3 channels. We're going to go on to now the UHF radio, and remember we've got to select. We're on channel 2 on the UHF radio, and we've had no traffic back. We're going to select the channel 1, which is our flight, and see can we talk to them. So we're going to go back to channel 1. We're in the preset mode here, and I'm going to select that radio, and we can see we've selected the UHF radio from our mic button. We're going to choose wingman, maneuvers, and we're just going to give them a random task.
2, brake left. 2, copy.
Okay, so that's all working, and we're going to switch back to channel 2 in the hope that we might get some communications from whoever's on 255. And we're going to now go to the final radio, which is the AM radio, and if we look on our briefing we can see that tuned in here are the North tanker and the South tanker on channel 1 and 2 respectively. So we're going to go back to channel 1 with my mic switch, select the FM radio and select tankers, and Texaco is the North tanker.
Texaco, Enfield 1-1, request rejoin. Enfield 1-1, Texaco, proceed.
I'm going to change that because he's talking to us fine. I'm going to change the frequency and now talk to the next one. Remember it has to be the FM radio tankers, and we're going to talk to Shell.
Chevy 1, passing waypoint 6 at 8,000.
Okay, that's a feedback from Chevy, which is talking to us on our UHF channel 2 radio. And we're going to now talk to, so that tells us that that second channel is tuned in fine, and we're going to now talk to our Shell, which is a South tanker.
Enfield 1-1, Shell, proceed to pre-contact at 18,000.
Okay, so you can
Phone 1 rejoin, passing waypoint 6 at 7,000.
we can see that all the radios now are communicating on the various preset channels. And the last thing I want to just show is these 3 buttons here are the buttons which control the volume controls on those radios, and in this particular setup these 2 radios are swapped over. Just let me just show briefly the VHF. We VHF, UHF and FM, which I would have expected would be the AM radio, the UHF and the FM radio, but these 2 buttons on my setup are switched over. I'm not sure it's a problem because I've got some modified files, but it's not a big deal. You just need to check yourself which is the correct one. But if we want to reduce the volume, there's we can either mute the volume by clicking the button, or we can roll it backwards using the mouse wheel. Okay, thanks for watching, and any feedback welcome.